Now, the leader of the NDP isn't, it was interesting today to listen to Jagmeet Singh. He's not saying categorically whether he will ultimately support the speech from the throne or not, but he says he can't support it now and wants the Prime Minister to deliver on key NDP priorities. He's got a plan to try and have discussions with the Prime Minister to change the speech. Here's my conversation with the NDP leader on Parliament Hill tonight. Jagmeet Singh, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
My pleasure.
Can you support this speech from the throne or not?
As it stands, it's not good enough. Given the struggles that Canadians are faced with, the current engagements or promises that the Liberal government put forward are just simply not satisfactory to deal with those problems. He mentions national pharmacare, but doesn't say universal, doesn't say it's public, doesn't even accept his own report commissioned and written by Dr. Hoskins. This shows to me that he's not really committed. I don't want to close the door on support, but as it stands, it's not good enough, and the Prime Minister and I need to have a chat.
Okay. To what end?
Well, to see that there's
speech
some real,
from the throne, how do you change it?
To see some real commitments. And right now, if all it is national pharmacare, that's not satisfactory for our support. But if the Prime Minister says, you know, we're going to table a bill that's going to be universal and public and single payer, and if he comes out and says, I accept and support the Commission report that says it needs to be universal and public, then it's a starting point.
Okay, so
we've got to look at some of those
and
things.
there's kind of a process to this, as you know. There's a speech from the throne, it gets passed by the House or it doesn't. There's a couple of opportunities for amendments from the opposition parties, the first and second opposition parties, so you don't get one, you don't get an amendment. So how do you see this changing? So if you sit down with Justin Trudeau and he says, look, I am in favor, I didn't put it in the speech from the throne, but I'm in favor of the model you propose, that'll be good enough?
Well, I want to see some commitments then. Public confirmation that that's the way to go, some legislation, support of our legislation that we're bringing forward, which is a framework for universal pharmacare. I also asked the Prime Minister to stop taking Indigenous kids to court. It doesn't have to be in the throne speech, but if he stops taking the Indigenous kids to court, that would give me some confidence that he's really willing to work on reconciliation in a meaningful way and not taking Indigenous kids to court who are faced with massive discrimination.
It sounds like you're saying you're prepared to support the speech from the throne if you get some guarantees of things that are not in the speech from the throne.
Well, what I'm saying is, as it stands, those commitments are empty. It's just saying the word national pharmacare when he used the word universal for dental care, but purposely omitting it for pharmacare, to me is a problem. And I want to see some commitments to what his own report stated.
Right. So
and he can make those commitments in many ways. I'm not going to delineate or limit the way the Prime Minister does that, but I'm certainly going to push the Prime Minister to do more than simply say the words national pharmacare. I want to see a commitment to something that's going to actually help out Canadians.
So if it's a simple conversation between you and Justin Trudeau and he guarantees to you, says, look, Jagmeet, I'm going to give you what you want. It's not, I mean, I'm not sure how that moves you any further. If it's not written down, if it's not on paper, how is it any better of a guarantee?
I want to see legislation.
If he tells you, yeah, I'm going to do it, but
I want to see legislation. I want to see public commitments. I want to see supports for.
But you won't see legislation before.
I want to see supports for our legislation that we are tabling.
Right, but you won't vote on pharmacare legislation before you vote on the speech from the throne.
Well, if I see some real concrete steps and some openness to some concrete steps, if the Prime Minister steps up and says, I accept that the way to move forward is a universal, publicly delivered pharmacare for all so that every Canadian gets access to pharmacare, and he endorses that position publicly, that would be a step forward. If the Prime Minister says, I'm not going to take Indigenous kids to court, we're going to stop that process right now, that would give me some confidence. If the Prime Minister says, I understand that our throne speech didn't have any clear targets, but we need to have targets that are science-based, backed up with accountability, to fight the climate crisis, then that would give me some confidence. Right now, it's just vague and it's not good enough.
If I can be permitted, you're laying out what sounds like a series of red lines here. So let me walk you through it. So let's say he sits with you and says, look, I can be talked into a universal, single-payer national pharmacare plan, but you don't get a commitment to walk away from court challenges involving Indigenous kids in the Child Welfare Service. Then what? Well, you still don't support the speech?
Right now, as it stands, it's not good enough, and I'm willing to have a conversation.
Do you want all of the things you're talking about, or is one or two of them okay? Is there one single thing that
I'm willing to have a conversation with the Prime Minister to get a sense of if he's willing to go beyond these empty words. And if there's some commitments that are concrete to deal with the problems that people are facing, then I'll be more open to supporting. As it stands, it's not good enough. And I'm willing, though, to work with the Prime Minister to find a way where he actually does things that are concrete on climate crisis, on healthcare, on Indigenous, on justice for Indigenous people. I haven't seen those commitments so far, and I'm open to how the Prime Minister shows me them, but I need to see those commitments. We as a team need to see those commitments.
Okay, I'm curious then why wouldn't you close the door on it then? So in the absence, this is a parliamentary procedural process. You get a speech from the throne, members of Parliament get to try to amend it with a couple of amendments, an amendment and sub-amendment, and then it gets voted on. So that's part of the process. And I guess I'm wondering, given that the Bloc has said they're prepared to support it, why you wouldn't just say, I'm voting against it?
Well,
and then I'm going to have conversations with the Prime Minister.
My goal isn't to tear down government. My goal is to find ways
But
for
you won't
things to
tear
work.
them down, the Bloc's going to support them.
My approach is I want to be constructive, and I'm not trying to draw lines in the sand arbitrarily. I want to say what he's presented is something that's not sufficient. If he wants my support, and if he thinks it's important to have New Democrats supporting and pushing forward together, then there's an option to do that. And I'm saying very clearly what those steps are. If he makes sure that the universal pharmacare is a priority and he accepts his own report, that would give me an indication that he's serious and we're willing to work on it. If he stops taking Indigenous kids to court, that shows that he's willing to help out those kids. I need to see some more commitments. It's up to the Prime Minister. I mean, the Prime Minister doesn't have to work with me. But I want him to know he's not going to be able to count on New Democrats to work together unless he's going to do something that helps out Canadians, that lifts them up.
And if he doesn't do that, where do you think that leaves you in the wake of the speech from the throne? A couple of months from now, let's say it's probably going to get voted on, I think, in January. So after all of that, where will that leave you in terms of the relationship with the Prime Minister if you have these conversations, or he does, maybe he'll tell you, I don't need any conversations with you.
Yeah.
What then?
Well, I mean, we've got a
Does that sour
minority
the
government.
water? Does that?
No, we've got a minority government, and we've got one role. Our role isn't to support the Liberal government. Our role is to lift up Canadians and make their lives better, to help out people with their health care, with their housing, with the climate crisis, which they're struggling with. And I'm willing to work with the Prime Minister if he wants to do those things. But if he's just trying to stay in power, then I guess it's pretty obvious he can go to the Bloc. If he wants to cut taxes for the wealthiest, he can probably go to the Conservatives. But if he wants to make life better for Canadians, he's got to come to me, and I'm willing to work with him on that.
All right, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much.